Episode 2, When Endurance Became the Baseline. Opening. There used to be a difference between a hard stretch and normal work. You'd push for a while. You'd deal with the pressure. You'd get through the deadline or the busy season, and then things would ease up. Not because work stopped mattering, but because that push was understood to be temporary. Somewhere along the way, that easing stopped happening. What coping was supposed to be. Coping skills were never meant to be a lifestyle. They were designed for deadlines, emergencies, short periods of strain. You would stay late for a bit. You would take on extra responsibility for a while. You'd stretch yourself knowing there was an end point. That end point mattered. It's what made effort sustainable. The quiet shift. Over time, something changed. The same behaviors that were once used to get through short stretches started getting treated as normal. Staying late stopped being a temporary ask. Handling more stopped being exceptional. Flexibility stopped being situational. It became the baseline. Not announced, not debated, just assumed. What used to be called coping quietly became the expected pace. Endurance became a measure. Endurance is a real skill. Being able to push through difficulty matters. Being resilient matters. The problem starts when endurance stops being something you use and becomes something you're measured by. When how much you can handle, how long you can sustain it, how little you complain becomes the evidence of your value, at that point, endurance isn't a tool anymore. It's a test. Why this gets misread? When people eventually slow down, it looks strange from the outside. They volunteer less. They move more carefully. They stop jumping at every opportunity. From the outside, that gets labeled as disengagement, but from the inside, it feels very different. It feels like fatigue catching up after a pace that never ended. It feels like protecting capacity. It feels like learning what pushing actually costs. Why people didn't quit. Most people didn't stop caring. They didn't suddenly lose motivation. They didn't become lazy. They didn't give up. They adjusted. They stopped sprinting because sprinting stopped leading anywhere. That adjustment gets misread because the system still assumes endurance is temporary, even when it isn't treated that way anymore. What this means? This explains why burnout doesn't feel dramatic, rest feels risky, slowing down feels like failure, and pacing feels like a moral flaw. None of that is about character. It's about a mismatch between what endurance was meant to be and what it quietly became. Closing. Most people didn't fail to keep up. They adapted to a pace that stopped giving anything back. That's not a personal shortcoming. It's a predictable outcome when coping becomes permanent.